Welcome back to The Sheep and the Wolf, and welcome to a scandalously late May wrap-up. I've been so insanely busy, first with work, and then with family stuff and friend stuff, and then with moving house, that I haven't really had any time to film this video any earlier, but I read a lot of books in May and I have a lot of thoughts about them, so I did still want to make this video even though we're like midway through June already. I started the month with Our Endless Numbered Days by Claire Fuller. I don't have a physical copy of the book because I borrowed it from Leon, who has appeared in my videos before. She had it and she had read it and she really wanted someone to talk about the book with, so she practically forced me to read it, and so I did because I'm a good friend. The book is about Peggy, whose father is kind of a doomsday prepper in Britain, and then one day he takes Peggy to a cabin in Germany, I think, and he tells her that the world has pretty much collapsed and they are the only two human beings left. It's a relatively new book. It came out last year and it was pretty popular. It's won some awards and stuff like that. I'm not a massive fan. I liked it well enough, but I don't think it lived up to what I had come to expect of it, which may not be the book's fault, but I don't know, it just really didn't, float my boat. I thought the main character, Peggy, was pretty annoying in her way of telling the story, which I guess may be kind of the point. I do understand that. It just wasn't my cup of tea. I also saw all the massive reveals and plot twists coming for miles, so I wasn't all that surprised at the end of this book. Anyway, I ended up rating it 3 out of 5 stars on Goodreads, which is what I do with books that I like but not that much. I do want to make a side note that if I'd gone into this book with different expectations or, a different perception of what it was going to be like, I think I would have liked it a lot better. I think this has a lot to do with the way books are marketed, and that's something that interests me a lot and something I might explore further at some point. Next, I read Reckless Magic by Rachel Higginson, which was sent to me by the author herself, and from what I understand and what I've been able to find, it's a self-published book. It's also part 1 in a series. This book is about a girl called Eden, a teenage girl who seems normal, except for the fact that mysterious things keep happening around her, which has led to her being kicked out of several high schools. It turns out, of course, that she's a magical being and that there is this whole magical world that she didn't know anything about, and that she's actually quite important in this world. I didn't like this book at all, which kind of makes me feel bad because the author took the time and effort and money to personally send this to me and signed it and everything, and I really wanted to like it, but I really didn't. The thing is that she was so nice that I don't want to be responsible for people deciding not to pick up this book because of this video that I'm making. I don't know if I have that kind of influence, but if I do, I don't want it. Anyway, I'm still debating whether I should make a separate review video for this book. I might change it into something a bit more general about, getting sent books by authors and how that makes me feel. Spoiler alert, not good. I also read Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe by Benjamin Alire Saenz, which had been on my TBR for a very long time, and the bookshop I work at hosts a YA book club every month, and this was one of the reads, so I figured I'd go ahead and join in the fun. I really, really liked this book most of the way through, but then the big reveal towards the end really pissed me off, not because of what's revealed, but because of the way it is presented in the book. I'm trying really hard not to spoil this for anyone who hasn't read it, but it might be a good idea to just turn off the sound until I put this book down. What I don't like is that his parents tell him, and he's like, no, that's not true, that's not how I feel, and they're like, oh yes it is. Instead of giving him the time to figure it out by himself and trusting him to come to terms with who he is, they're forcing this on him, and I think that's just wrong and all kinds of problematic, which is an overused word, but I think it applies in this case. And it's a shame because I really did enjoy this book tremendously and I fell in love with the characters, but now I just feel so conflicted about it. After that, I picked up Paradise Lodge by Stibbe. This is an arc that I got through work, and I think the book's coming out kind of now-ish. It's about this 15-year-old girl named Lizzie Vogel who applies for a job as an auxiliary nurse at Paradise Lodge, which is a nursing home and also a pun on Paradise Lost. I like this book a lot. For me, it was a really good combination of kind of the funny comedic side of all the stuff that goes on at the nursing home, but also the kind of more emotional disarming, touching things that happen both with the patients and the staff. It's not a book that I would necessarily buy or would want to read again and again, but it was definitely the kind of well-written, light-hearted book that I really needed. Next, because the month still wasn't over, I read The Rosie Project by Graeme Simsion. This is another one of those books that I've been meaning to read forever. I enjoyed this book in many ways. I like how they didn't go with the obvious answer in the paternity test. I loved the cocktail evening scene, that was amazing. And I really loved the depiction of a high-functioning individual who is somewhere on the autism spectrum. Because usually, or at least often, books about people with autism are books about teenagers, teenage boys with autism, most often, in my experience anyway. And I like how they stayed away from that trope. It was quite refreshing. One thing that I simultaneously loved and hated about this book is that I could feel myself starting to think like the main character Don. His pattern of thought is extremely abstract and systematic, and it's very addictive. I had to sort of actively remind myself who I am to not kind of lose myself. But I did really like this book and I rated it 4 out of 5 stars on Goodreads. I then read The Knife of Never Letting Go by Ness, which I picked up secondhand because, again, it's one of those books that I'd heard a lot about and I put it on my TBR 1,000 years ago and I finally got to it in May. It was quite different from what I expected. I don't know actually what I expected, but not this. Also a narrator who has a very addictive style of narration, and I found myself wanting to use some of his more creative spellings in the week or so after I'd read it. This book is about a boy named Todd who lives in a town that consists only of men, and all of them can hear each other's thoughts. It's called noise, and it's basically this constant stream of thoughts and images that's pouring from everyone's brain. But then when Todd is out in the swamp one day, he finds this spot where there's complete silence, and that's really strange to him because he's never encountered that before, because even animals have noise. It's really an adventure story, but it's also a coming of age story because there is a lot of emphasis on Todd becoming a man, being the youngest boy in town and stuff like that. But obviously, since it's part 1 in a trilogy, there's no real conclusion to the story. In fact, it ends on a pretty big cliffhanger. Finally, in May, I read The Ask and the Answer, which is the sequel to The Knife of Never Letting Go. I borrowed it, so I don't have a physical copy to hold up for you guys, but just believe me. At the time that I was reading the book, I liked it well enough, but it didn't blow my mind, and it definitely wasn't as unputdownable as the first book. In retrospect, having read the entire series by now, I think that The Ask and the Answer suffers from kind of typical middle book syndrome where it's not as good as the first one because you've already kind of experienced the thrill of the story for the first time, and it's not as good as the final one because nothing's really resolved. The story moves in circles a lot. I also really hate this trope where the main character doesn't know anything because the characters who do know things, who make the plans, who, have all the information, refuse to share that information. It's something that's really prevalent in the first part of The Maze Runner, for example. The Knife of Never Letting Go kind of has the same thing, but because the story is so compelling, I was able to get over it. But in the second book, it really started to bother me that I didn't know anything. Like at the end of the book, I still didn't know what was true and what was not true and who to trust and who not to trust, which I think may be the point, but it still annoyed me. So these 5 books and 2 others that I don't have physical copies of are all the books I read in May, 7 in total, which I think is pretty good. It was an interesting reading month in that it started pretty badly and then picked up and then ended on kind of a letdown. If you want to talk to me about any of the books that I talked about in this video, feel free to do so in the comments section down below. Be careful with spoilers because there might be people who haven't read them. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you liked it, and I will see you again next time.